Maid's daughter asked a stranger for one dance. The music stopped cold. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's dive into the story. Clara had always felt invisible. As the daughter of the maid in one of the wealthiest households in town, she was used to being overlooked, ignored, and made to feel as though she didn't belong. The grand mansion where her mother worked was filled with wealth and luxury. Crystal chandeliers dangled from the high ceilings, and the floor was covered in marble so polished that it reflected everything perfectly. Guests in their tailored suits and glittering dresses moved through the space, their laughter echoing, while Clara remained at the edges of every room. She was the quiet one, the one who fetched coats and tidied up, the one who was never invited to join the fun. On that evening, the ballroom was alive with music and chatter. The guests were all dressed in their finest, swirling around the room in waltzes and quick steps, enjoying a night of celebration. Clara stood in a corner, barely visible to anyone, her heart heavy. She had been told by her mother to stay out of sight, as always. But this time, something inside her stirred. She was tired of being invisible, tired of being the background. She had never asked for anything, never even dreamed of stepping into the spotlight. But tonight, she wanted to ask for one thing. One simple thing that she knew could change the way she felt about herself. Taking a deep breath, Clara stepped out of the shadows and walked up to the stranger standing alone near the edge of the dance floor. He was a tall man, dressed in a sharp black tuxedo, his eyes scanning the room as if he were looking for someone. He looked at her briefly, almost as if she didn't belong in his world. Clara's heart pounded as she approached him. She had never spoken to someone like him before. Someone so refined, so far removed from her world. But she had made up her mind. She looked up at him, her voice shaking slightly, and said, "Excuse me, would you like to dance?" The man blinked, taken aback by her request. His expression softened for a moment, and then a smirk appeared on his face. He glanced around the room as if considering whether he should humor her. But Clara stood there, her hands clasped tightly together, her eyes not leaving his. "Are you sure?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. Clara nodded, her heart racing, hoping that maybe this time, someone would see her. She had no idea why she had chosen him, why she had asked him instead of one of the many familiar faces in the room. But in that moment, he was the only one who mattered. And then, without another word, he took her hand and led her onto the floor. As the music started again, Clara's nerves began to fade. The moment she stepped onto the floor, something inside her clicked. She wasn't just a maid's daughter anymore. She wasn't the invisible girl in the corner. She was a dancer, and she was about to show everyone what she could do. The music swirled around her as they danced, her movements graceful and confident, her feet gliding across the floor with ease. The crowd slowly took notice. Eyes that had once ignored her now followed her every move. Clara didn't care. She was lost in the rhythm, lost in the moment, as if the whole world had paused just for her. But then, something unexpected happened. The music suddenly stopped. Everyone froze. Clara's heart skipped a beat as she looked around, confused. The man who had been dancing with her stood still, staring at her with wide eyes. The room was silent, and for a moment, Clara wondered if she had done something wrong. But then, she saw it. The look on his face. The shock in his eyes. He had realized something that no one else had noticed. Something that would change everything. The man's eyes widened, his face a mixture of disbelief and awe. Clara's graceful movements had stunned him, but what shocked him even more was the recognition of her talent. The room was silent as the music had abruptly stopped, and every single guest was now focused on Clara. Her face flushed with embarrassment as she looked around, unsure of what had just happened. The man, still holding her hand, stepped back slightly, and the crowd murmured among themselves. Clara's heart raced. She hadn't expected this. She had only wanted a chance to dance, to feel the music flow through her, and let go of the weight of being overlooked. But now, everything had changed. The room, once filled with chatter and laughter, was now frozen in time, as if the music had stolen the air from the atmosphere. Clara felt the sting of the silence. She started to pull away, ready to retreat back into the shadows where she felt she belonged. But before she could step back, the man spoke. You're not just a dancer, he said, his voice barely above a whisper, but enough to break the tension in the air. Clara's eyes widened. What did he mean? She was just a maid's daughter, someone who had spent her life cleaning and serving, never imagining she would be noticed for anything other than her work. What are you talking about? She asked, her voice trembling. You've got something special, he continued, his gaze intense. That wasn't just dancing. That was art. His words hung in the air, and Clara's mind raced. Had he really meant that? She had never considered herself anything special. To her, dancing was just an escape. But as the man continued to look at her, something inside her shifted. Maybe, just maybe, she was more than she had believed. The crowd, too, seemed to realize it. People had started to gather around the edge of the dance floor, whispering in hushed tones. Clara had no idea how she had become the center of attention in such a short time. The music began again, this time softer, slower. The man led Clara back to the center of the floor, but this time, he didn't mock her or look down on her. Instead, he treated her as an equal. They danced together in perfect harmony, and Clara found herself losing herself in the rhythm again, but this time, it was different. She could feel the eyes of the crowd on her, but instead of feeling small and insignificant, she felt powerful. The music seemed to lift her higher, her steps more fluid than ever. As they danced, Clara could see the faces of the guests in the crowd. Some of them were in awe, others were astonished, but all of them were watching her, truly watching her for the first time. When the music finally stopped again, this time there was no awkward silence. Instead, there was applause. The man smiled at Clara, his eyes filled with admiration. You should be performing, he said, as the crowd around them cheered. You have a gift, and the world needs to see it. Clara stood there, stunned. For the first time in her life, someone had not only seen her, but recognized her worth. The man's words were a turning point. She had always been told she was invisible, that she didn't matter. But tonight, that had changed. The applause continued as Clara realized something profound. She wasn't just the maid's daughter anymore. She was Clara, a person with value, with a talent that could shine in the right light. This moment was only the beginning. The applause was deafening. Clara stood in the center of the dance floor, her heart racing, her breath coming in shallow bursts as the realization hit her. She had just done something that had never happened before. For the first time in her life, she had been noticed, not just as the maid's daughter, but as someone who had a talent, something unique to offer. The man who had danced with her, the stranger who had first caught her in that awkward moment, was still standing beside her, his hand on her shoulder, a look of admiration in his eyes. He smiled at her warmly. You're amazing, he said. Clara wasn't sure how to respond. She had never received such praise before. Growing up, all she had ever known was hard work and quiet submission. She had been taught to be seen, but never heard. Yet, here she was, at the center of attention, with people applauding her for something she had never thought would matter. The man's gaze never left her. You should be on stage, he continued, his voice sincere. The world needs to see what you can do. Clara was taken aback. On stage? She had never even dreamed of such a thing. The idea felt impossible, as if it belonged to another world entirely, one that she could never be a part of. I'm just the maid's daughter, she replied, her voice small, unsure. The man chuckled softly. That doesn't matter, he said. Talent doesn't care about where you come from. Clara looked around the room. The guests, who had once seen her only as part of the background, were now watching her with a new respect. Whispers filled the air, not of mockery, but of admiration. It was as if the entire atmosphere of the room had shifted, and Clara was the reason for it. Her mother, who had been cleaning behind the scenes, stepped into the ballroom, her eyes widening as she saw the change. Clara's heart swelled with a mixture of pride and disbelief. Could it really be true? Could she, the girl who had always felt invisible, now be someone worth noticing? The man who had danced with her leaned in closer, his voice gentle but firm. I know someone who can help you. I'll get you in touch with the right people. Clara's mind raced. She had no idea what he meant, but the possibility was enough to send a shiver down her spine. She had always known that her life would follow a certain path, one of service and silence. But now, for the first time, she saw a different future, one that was filled with possibilities. As the night wore on, Clara felt something inside her shift. The music was still playing, the guests still dancing, but she no longer felt like an outsider. She felt like she belonged, like she had a place in this world of wealth and power. And as she left the ballroom that night, her mind was buzzing with thoughts of what might come next. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, she was ready to find out. The next few days were a whirlwind for Clara. After the dance, the man who had praised her talent followed through on his promise. He introduced her to a woman named Lydia, a renowned choreographer who had worked with some of the biggest names in the industry. Clara could hardly believe it. She was just a maid's daughter, and now, she was meeting someone like Lydia, someone who could change everything. Lydia was everything Clara had imagined a famous choreographer to be: confident, poised, and full of energy. She immediately saw the potential in Clara. "You've got something special," Lydia told her, her sharp eyes studying Clara's every movement. "You've been hiding it for so long, but I can help you bring it out." For the first time in Clara's life, someone believed in her. Lydia offered Clara a chance to train with her, to learn the art of dance in a way that was beyond anything Clara had ever experienced. The training was rigorous, demanding every ounce of Clara's energy. But it was also exhilarating. Every step, every turn, every leap felt like a step toward a new life, a life that Clara had only ever dreamed of. Her mother, although initially hesitant about the idea, supported Clara wholeheartedly. "I've never seen you so happy, Clara," her mother said one evening after Clara returned home from another intense session with Lydia. "If this is what you want, then I'll be behind you." Clara was overwhelmed by her mother's encouragement. She had always feared that her mother would think her foolish for wanting something beyond the life they had. But now, it seemed like everything was falling into place. As the weeks went by, Clara's skills improved dramatically. She learned new techniques, pushed her body in ways she never thought possible, and most importantly, she began to see herself in a different light. She wasn't just the maid's daughter anymore. She was Clara, a dancer with a future. Lydia, who had initially seen raw potential, now saw a young woman who could become a professional dancer. She began to make calls, setting up auditions and performances, pushing Clara into the world she had always kept at arm's length. Clara was terrified but also excited. The world of professional dance was intimidating. It was a world full of competition, rejection, and pressure. But as Clara stepped onto that first stage, the nerves melted away. The music played, and all that mattered was the dance. Clara poured every ounce of emotion into her movements. She didn't just dance. She told a story with her body. She felt the audience's attention shift, felt them watching her, seeing her for the first time. When the performance ended, there was a moment of silence. And then, the applause started. Clara stood there, breathing heavily, her heart racing. She had done it. She had stepped into the world she once thought was beyond her reach. The world that had always seemed so far away was now hers to explore. Clara's journey had only just begun, but it was already clear that she was on a path that would change her life forever. Clara's life began to take a shape she had never imagined. After that first performance, everything changed. The applause, the recognition, and the opportunity to train further with Lydia were all signs that her journey had just begun. But the path was not without its challenges. The world of professional dance was unforgiving, and the competition was fierce. Clara quickly realized that raw talent alone would not be enough to secure her place in this world. She had to work harder than ever before, constantly pushing herself beyond her limits. There were long hours in the studio, countless rehearsals, and moments of self-doubt that crept in when she thought about the pressure of it all. But every time she faced a setback, she remembered the way the audience had looked at her that night. Their eyes filled with admiration and respect. That kept her going. Clara's mother, who had always been her biggest supporter, saw the changes in her daughter. The once shy and uncertain girl who had lived in the background was now standing tall, full of confidence. Clara's performances became more frequent, and with each one, her confidence grew. She was no longer just a maid's daughter. She was a dancer, a professional, someone who was slowly carving out a name for herself in the industry. But as Clara's career started to take off, she also began to feel the weight of the expectations on her shoulders. Lydia, while supportive, was also pushing her harder than ever. "You've got to keep moving forward, Clara," she would say after every rehearsal, pushing her even further. You can't rest on your laurels now. The pressure was immense, but Clara understood the importance of every moment. One evening, after a particularly grueling rehearsal, Clara found herself sitting alone on a bench outside the studio, exhausted and unsure if she could keep up with the pace. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, and when she pulled it out, she saw a message from the man who had first believed in her. "I'm proud of you," it read. "You've come a long way. Keep going." Clara smiled, feeling a warmth in her chest. Those simple words meant more to her than she could put into words. They reminded her that no matter how tough the journey became, there were people who believed in her. As time passed, Clara's performances became more refined, more powerful. Her body, once stiff and uncertain, now moved with ease and grace, every step filled with purpose. The applause grew louder after each performance, and soon, Clara was being invited to perform at larger venues, in front of more prestigious audiences. But with each step forward, she faced new challenges. The world of high-level dance was filled with competition, politics, and jealousy. There were dancers who resented Clara's rapid rise, and whispers began to circulate about how she had gotten her big break. But Clara didn't let it bother her. She had worked too hard to let negativity stand in her way. She focused on what mattered: the dance, the audience, and the joy of performing. One night, as Clara was preparing for a major performance, she stood backstage, staring at the crowd filling the theater. For a brief moment, she felt the weight of the world on her shoulders. But then, she remembered how far she had come, from a maid's daughter, cleaning floors and going unnoticed, to a dancer commanding the stage, captivating audiences with every movement. Clara knew, without a doubt, that this was where she was meant to be. Clara stood backstage, her heart racing as she waited for the curtain to rise. The theater was packed with eager faces, each person anticipating her performance. She had been here before, on smaller stages, but this time was different. This time, the stakes were higher. The audience before her included critics, potential sponsors, and people who could change the trajectory of her career. But none of that mattered to Clara. What mattered was the dance. This was her moment, the culmination of everything she had worked for. Her mind wandered back to the first time she had stepped onto the stage, unsure of herself, afraid that the world would see her for the maid's daughter she once was. But now, as she prepared for this performance, she felt something different. She felt like a star. The music started, and Clara stepped onto the stage, her body moving in perfect harmony with the rhythm. Every step, every leap, felt like it belonged to her. She was no longer the timid girl in the shadows. She was a dancer, someone who could captivate and command the attention of an entire room. As Clara danced, she felt a rush of emotions flood through her. The applause from previous performances was nothing compared to the energy she felt now. She could feel the power of the music flowing through her veins, her every movement an expression of her newfound strength. The audience watched in awe, mesmerized by her grace and precision. The lights above her seemed brighter, the applause louder, as if the world itself had shifted to reflect the confidence she now carried with her. As the performance came to an end, Clara stood there, breathless, her body trembling from the exertion. For a moment, everything seemed to stand still. The world around her blurred, and all that mattered was the feeling of having given everything to the performance. The audience was silent for a split second, and then, as if on cue, they erupted into applause. Clara's heart soared. The standing ovation was overwhelming. She had done it. She had proven not only to the audience but to herself that she belonged here, that she was worthy of this stage. As Clara made her way off stage, her mind raced. She had just performed in front of some of the most important people in the industry. But as she looked around at the backstage crew, her fellow dancers, and the people who had been there with her from the start, she felt a deep sense of gratitude. This wasn't just about the applause or the recognition. It was about the journey, the long hours, the sweat, the sacrifices. Everything had led her to this moment. And now, with the performance behind her, Clara knew that this was just the beginning. The road ahead would be filled with more challenges, more competition, and more obstacles. But Clara was no longer afraid. She was ready to face whatever came next. She had proven to herself that she had the talent, the drive, and the heart to succeed. And as the curtain closed, Clara smiled to herself, knowing that the future was hers to shape. Clara's life had changed in ways she never thought possible. After her successful performance, doors began to open. Agents reached out, and opportunities to perform in even bigger theaters started to flood in. She had become the rising star in the dance world, the girl from humble beginnings now turning heads everywhere she went. However, as her fame grew, so did the pressure. The constant rehearsals, the need to maintain her image, the fear of failing. It all began to take a toll on Clara. The excitement of her early performances started to feel like a distant memory. Instead, there was a weight on her shoulders, an unrelenting reminder that with success came expectations. She found herself struggling with self-doubt, a feeling she hadn't experienced in a long time. She had worked so hard to get here, and now that she was finally living her dream, she feared it would all come crashing down. Her confidence, once unshakable, began to waver. The more she performed, the more she questioned if she truly belonged. One evening, after a particularly tough rehearsal, Clara sat alone in the dressing room, staring at her reflection in the mirror. Her makeup had smudged, her hair was damp with sweat, and her eyes were tired, filled with a sadness that she couldn't shake. She had never expected this side of fame, the loneliness that came with the constant pressure to be perfect. As she sat there, the door to the dressing room opened, and Lydia, her mentor, walked in. Lydia had always been a pillar of strength, someone who had believed in Clara from the start. But tonight, even Lydia seemed different. Her usual confidence was replaced with a more somber expression. Clara looked up at her, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I can keep doing this." Lydia paused, sitting down beside Clara. "It's normal to feel like this," she said softly. "The pressure, the constant need to perform at your best, it can break anyone." Clara looked at her mentor, tears welling up in her eyes. "I'm scared. I don't want to disappoint anyone." Lydia placed a comforting hand on Clara's shoulder. "You can't worry about disappointing others. This is your journey, not theirs. You've come this far because of your passion, your dedication, and your love for dance. Never forget why you started." Clara nodded, but the weight still felt heavy. She knew Lydia was right, but the fear of failure was overwhelming. "I don't know how to keep going," Clara admitted. "I feel like I'm losing myself in all of this." Lydia smiled gently, looking Clara in the eyes. "You are not alone in this. Everyone faces doubts, even the most successful people. The difference is they don't let those doubts define them. You are stronger than you think. And I'm here for you every step of the way." For the first time in days, Clara felt a sense of relief. The burden didn't feel as heavy with Lydia by her side. She realized that it was okay to feel unsure, but she couldn't let those doubts stop her from pursuing what she loved. She wasn't alone in her struggle. With that reassurance, Clara stood up, a renewed sense of determination in her eyes. She was going to keep dancing, not for anyone else, but for herself. She had come too far to let fear take over now. As she walked out of the dressing room, Clara knew that the road ahead would still be challenging, but she was ready to face it head-on, with the strength to overcome whatever came her way. Clara's resolve only grew stronger after that conversation with Lydia. The doubts that had plagued her for so long still lingered, but with each passing day, she learned how to push them aside. She kept dancing, not for the applause or the validation, but because it was the one thing that made her feel truly alive. Slowly, she began to embrace the journey, the ups and downs, the challenges and triumphs. Her performances became even more captivating, more genuine. She no longer danced with the fear of failure weighing her down. Instead, she danced with the understanding that perfection wasn't the goal, growth and passion were. Clara's breakthrough came when she was invited to perform at a prestigious gala. This wasn't just another performance. This was a chance to showcase everything she had learned, everything she had become. It was the moment that could solidify her place in the dance world. But as the date of the gala approached, Clara felt the pressure mounting once again. The stakes were higher than ever before. She had to be perfect. She had to prove that she belonged at the top. The rehearsals became more intense, the choreography more complex, and Clara found herself once again questioning her abilities. Was she truly ready for this? The night before the gala, Clara sat in her room, staring at the mirror, lost in thought. Her mind raced with doubts. She had come so far, but what if she wasn't enough? What if the audience didn't see her the way she saw herself now? What if the critics didn't recognize her talent? The fear was suffocating, But then she remembered something Lydia had told her. The stage is yours, but only if you claim it. Own your space, own your talent, and trust in yourself. Clara took a deep breath, her reflection staring back at her. She had worked too hard to let fear control her now. She had come from nothing, and now she was on the verge of something great. She wasn't going to let this moment slip away. The next evening, Clara stepped into the grand ballroom of the gala, her heart pounding with anticipation. The guests were all dressed in their finest attire, their conversations a soft hum in the background. As she walked to the stage, Clara felt the weight of their eyes on her. But this time, it didn't feel like pressure, it felt like an invitation. She was ready. The music began, and Clara took her first step onto the stage. As she danced, she felt an overwhelming sense of freedom. There was no doubt, no fear, just pure expression. She lost herself in the rhythm, in the movement, in the beauty of the moment. She was no longer just the maid's daughter, trying to prove herself. She was Clara, a dancer with a story to tell. The performance was breathtaking. Every move was precise, every leap effortless, every spin a masterpiece. The audience was entranced, their eyes fixed on her as if she were the only person in the room. When the music finally stopped, Clara stood there, breathless, her heart racing. The silence in the room was palpable, and then the applause erupted. It was deafening, overwhelming, and for the first time, Clara truly felt that she had earned every bit of it. The critics, the sponsors, and everyone in the audience saw her for who she was, a dancer, a star, someone who had overcome everything to be there. She had claimed her space, and now the world knew her name. Clara stood backstage, her heart still racing from the overwhelming applause that had filled the room after her performance. The night had been everything she had dreamed of and more. She had faced her fears, conquered her doubts, and danced with a confidence that came from deep within. But as the crowd's cheers continued to echo in her ears, Clara realized that the applause wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of something much bigger. In the days that followed, Clara's career skyrocketed. Offers from top ballet companies and prestigious theaters flooded in. The critics who had once doubted her now praised her talent and dedication. But even as her fame grew, Clara remained grounded, never forgetting the lessons she had learned along the way. She knew that the journey she had started was far from over. Success in the dance world came with constant challenges, and Clara was ready to face them all. She had a fire inside her now, a passion that couldn't be extinguished. Clara continued to perform, each show more brilliant than the last. Her name became synonymous with excellence, and audiences everywhere eagerly awaited her next performance. But with every new achievement, Clara remained humble, never forgetting the struggles that had shaped her. She was no longer just a girl from humble beginnings. She was Clara, a dancer who had earned her place in the spotlight through hard work, determination, and an unwavering belief in herself. As she stood in front of the mirror before another performance, Clara smiled at the reflection staring back at her. It was a reflection of someone who had not only mastered the art of dance, but had also mastered the art of believing in herself. The world had seen her struggle, but now they saw her strength. And that strength was something no one could take away. As Clara took her first step onto the stage that night, she knew that this was just another chapter in her story. A story that was far from finished. The future was wide open, filled with endless possibilities. And Clara, with all her talent and heart, was ready to seize it. She had become more than a dancer. She had become a symbol of resilience, of breaking barriers, and of the power of never giving up on yourself. The applause that followed each performance no longer felt like a goal to reach, but a reminder of how far she had come. Clara had done what so many had said she couldn't do. She had proven that with passion and perseverance, anything was possible. And as the curtain fell once more, Clara took a moment to savor the silence before the next round of applause, knowing that she had earned every second of it.